The truth is there's so much more that PDF to Excel can do, but I thought it was important to highlight how you can use it to convert PDFs of bank statements into Excel, because that's obviously going to be a very common use case for all of us as accountants and bookkeepers. And we're going to walk you through the process in this lesson, and here's the key, and I touched on it in the course overview, which is this. If I have a bank account with Bank of America, the layout for that statement is always going to be the same. So once I create a layout for a B of A business checking account, what you're going to see is that with PDF to Excel, I can actually save that layout, and I can export it even to a file, so that if I'm using this with other associates at my firm, I can put that export into, say, a Dropbox folder so that other people at my firm can use what I've already taken the time to create and load up that layout, so that if they need to convert a PDF of a bank account from Bank of America for a business checking account, they can do it without having to recreate all the steps that I've done. So we're going to take a look and see how easy it is and how nice PDF to Excel makes it for us to be able to take even complicated bank statement layouts and quickly and easily get them converted into an Excel file. And again, the point being, once that's done, I can do it over and over again very quickly, so that after I do the initial layout, I can get an entire year's worth of bank statements exported to Excel and in a format that's easy to import into my accounting software in just minutes flat. Come along with me, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about and what this looks like. Earlier this year, as of the time I'm recording this, I had a client reach out to me and explain that he had not done any bank reconciliation or really any bookkeeping for all of last year, and he needed to get that done. So I said, okay, let's get on with your bank and let's download a CSV file, because that'll make it easier to import the transactions into your accounting software. And he checked with his bank and got back to me, and the bottom line was all he could get were PDF statements. He couldn't get the CSV file. He was able to get the last couple months of the year, I think, but most of the year he was not able to get in any format other than a PDF. So enter PDF to Excel. And one of the reasons I love using this software in particular for this purpose is based on a lot of what I'm about to show you. It's got to do with all the different things that you can do while you're preparing it for export, so that when you do export it, it's really clean and it's really ready to just, maybe minimal changes need to be made in Excel, but it's ready to go. It's ready to be imported. So let's see what I'm talking about here. I've got the statement up. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can see a little more clearly. And there's a couple of things I want to mention before I really get into this. First of all, if you haven't already, I want you to install PDF to Excel, and I want you to get a bank statement, and I want you to follow along, because that's the only way you're going to learn this. There's a lot of little detailed things that I'm going to be showing you that, in my opinion, if you're not following along and doing them with me as I'm doing them, you're likely going to forget. So pause the video right now. If you haven't done that already, pause the video, go download and install PDF to Excel, and get a bank statement ready so that you can play a little bit of this video, pause it, do what I've done, make sure you get it, and then move on, because the other thing is everything kind of builds upon everything else. So with that in mind, I'll give you a second to go ahead and do that. And of course, you should hit the play button and resume once you're ready. So there are going to be two major sort of ways that we're going to break up this statement, for lack of a better way to put it. We're going to divide the statement up between tables and fields. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're starting off with the second page, because that's where the transactions are. The first page on this statement is just the summary information. So let's go right to the second page, because that's got the transactions that I really want. And notice over here, I'm on my Home tab, and in these settings, I've got, in this section here, you can have all pages the same, pages different, you can have them repeating, and you can check off first and last page are different, which is certainly the case with this statement. And once you've got these settings worked out based on the layout of your own statement, then you're ready to get started. And it's as simple as clicking and dragging over a region. So let's do that. I'm going to click and drag right here. And you'll notice that darker orange region that's sort of forming at the top, that's where it's looking for the headers. And if it goes away like it did here, then we can go over here to Content and we can click on Use Table Header, and it brings it back. And then now I want you to pay attention to what's going on down below here. So it's getting the information, but it hasn't got all the information. I've got to adjust my headers. Let's zoom in a little bit more. And I want to include the reference numbers there. So now I've got that, but it's got it in two different columns, right? So let's merge these, because I don't really care about this customer column. So I click and drag to highlight, right click, and choose merge. So now I've got one nice clean column here, and then I'm going to right click, and whatever you do down here in the preview area, it corresponds exactly to what's going on up top here. So notice if I click over here, it changes what's selected over here. So that's kind of cool because I can do a lot of the same things from either place depending on where I happen to be working in at that moment. And I love having that kind of flexibility in software like this. So now that I've got this in place, I want to give it a better column header. So let's call this bank reference number because that's really what this is for. And now that's done. So we've got the first table set up. Very simple, very easy, very quick. The other thing you'll notice is, for example, this column is for dates, right? So let's right-click this, and we're going to go to the column format output in date format, right? And then for this one, we want the output in. You can choose currency. I prefer number. That's just my stuff, if you will. Nothing needs to be formatted here. So let's go grab the next section now. I want to lay out the tables first. Then we're going to go back and do some additional massaging of the data. So the next section is the paper deposits. But notice it's broken up really into two tables side by side, right? If I zoom in a little. I've got date amount and then the reference number information and then repeated date amount for two different deposits that were made. So we're going to set this up as two separate tables. Okay, and then same thing with the header. And I want to click and drag that to get the header right. And I'm checking down here always to make sure that's working. And let's go over here and do the same thing. So I'm beginning to get my table layouts done. The other thing I want to do is, this is the electronic deposits. I'm sorry, yes, this is the electronic deposits. So I'm going to right click this and I'm going to name it. It just makes it easier for me, and you're going to see where this really comes in handy in a few minutes. So this is electronic deposits. And then this is paper deposits. Cancel that. Edit table title. But since the paper deposits section is really now broken up into two tables, I'm going to call this paper deposits 1. And let's call this paper deposits 2. Excellent. Now let's go down here and deal with the checks. So again, we'll use the table header. Scroll down. Always scroll down here and just check that everything in the preview is coming out the way you expect it to. And same deal as above. We have two tables really for the same section, which is checks paid. So let's call this checks paid 1. Checks paid 2. You can actually, by the way, copy the table here, so that it's, you might think it's faster. For me, it's just as easy to just click and drag and do it again. It only takes a second, as you saw. And now we have our final section. Just scrolling back up, make sure I didn't kind of miss anything here. All right. So now I have my ATM and debit transactions. So let's select that whole range. And again, we're down here, and it's not picking up my headers quite right. There it is. So by adjusting the top border of the header region, it found and picked up the correct titles here, amount and activity. So that's perfect. That's all set up. And then let's name this table. And this is ATM/debit card. So now we've got our basic table set up for each section. You almost could export it here. There's one more to do, which is our other withdrawals. So let's grab that real quick. Use table header. Bingo. I love watching this kind of update as I fix the table up above. So this is going to be other withdrawals. Let's name it. Perfect. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to make sure that the statement that I know by now, because I've urged you to do it like 3 times, the statement that you've got working with PDF to Excel, I want you to make sure you can finish all the basic table layouts, and then we're going to go back and we're going to sort of expand upon this a little bit and take it a few steps further in terms of getting this ready for import. Okay, so pause the video. Go get caught up with me if you're not already, and then of course once you're caught up you can click resume. But I'm watching you. Okay, so hopefully you did take the time to pause things and get caught up with me. And now we want to take it a step further, and I want to show you, first of all, you may be thinking, oh, let's just get it into Excel, and you could, like I said, but here's the problem with doing that at this particular stage. And as you just saw, I can resize the preview section. Here are the different sections, right? My electronic deposits is here. My paper deposits is here. My second table in paper deposits. But notice already the columns start to get inconsistent, right? Because over here I have my reference number, which is in column D in the electronic deposits section. And that's because I have this section here for activity. Now, I could exclude activity from this table. That would be one way. But I might want this information, especially when I'm importing into my accounting software, especially because that might help me or help the client help me determine what the nature of the expense is. So something like this I actually do want. But we do need to get the columns to conform, which means I'll need to make some changes to these tables. And so there's a few things. And there's one other thing is the tables are named again, based on the type of transaction that we're looking at in that table, right? So that's probably good information to include. And how do we do that? I mentioned at the top of this lesson that there were 2 basic structures we were going to be looking at, tables and fields. So far, all we've looked at are tables. Now we're going to look at fields. So let's go over and click and drag over electronic deposits. And notice what it does is it treats it as a field. You can tell because it's blue and not orange. And notice that it puts the that title over here, electronic deposits. So a field is kind of that. It's a title. It's something that might describe things at a high level on the statement, as opposed to your transaction, which is the detail level, right? But in this case, I don't want it at the top of the document because this is what it's going to look like when I export. I really want it probably in its own column, next to this table. So when I right-click the field over here where it says, and let me get rid of that pop-up. When I right-click the field over here, it says in conversion show field, and here's my choice with table. And this is where you can see right away how it comes in very handy that I named all the tables. It becomes very clear to see what's what. So otherwise it would just say table 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And once you get a few tables in, at least I start to get lost in it. So I'm going to choose electronic deposits. I want you to focus your eyes down here. And sure enough, it moves it away so it's no longer a title type of thing in the document, and it becomes, its own column. Appearance-wise, at least, it looks like it would be part of the table, and that's exactly what we want to accomplish. Then I'm going to set the field heading, and I'm just going to call this transaction type. Okay, this also might be a good time to save the layout so that we don't lose our changes. And let's just call this Comerica because that's the bank statement that we're doing this for. I'm actually going to call it Comerica 2 because I had a Comerica before that. So that's how we're going to start using fields. And that part's easy. Then we get to the next section. We have paper deposits. And I'm going to in conversion show field with table. Now remember, now we have 2 different paper deposit tables, right? We have 1 and 2. So this one I'm going to show with table 1. And that brings it over here. And again, I'm going to rename that transaction type. And I can't use this a second time, right? I can't right-click this, and now if I change it to table 3, it's going to move it, right? So that's not going to work. So what do? There is a solution. I'm just going to click and drag here in the blank space, right? We'll call this transaction type. And then we're going to set this one to go with
table, and this is paper deposits 2, right? So now that shows up here. And this is just so we can get the columns to conform, because in fact what you're going to see in a couple of minutes is I'm actually going to take this whole table and append it to this one. But before we can do that, we got to make sure everything lines up and everything's in the right order. So right now we're getting the extra fields in that or extra fields laid out that we need. Now, the other thing is this table has the activity section. These two tables do not. So we want to add in the activity part to each of these tables. So again, we're going to do that the same way. Over here, I'll just set up a blank field. Let's call it activity. And this is going to go with table. This is paper deposits 1, right? So that shows up here. Another one out here. This is going to go with paper deposits 2. And we'll rename that activity. Okay, and that should do it for the paper deposits. Then we get to the checks, right? Now the checks already get even kind of weirder in this case because they're already in a different order. Like every other section starts with the date, the checks start with the check number. So we already have to reorder what's already there, but plus we also want to get the transaction type and the activity space in there. So again, for the first one, I'm just going to use this, right? And this is going to go with table, and this is checks paid 1, right? So there it is, and that's going to be the transaction type. And then we need the activity in there. And this is checks paid 1. Perfect. Now let's take care of this part. So this one, again, I can't use the same field twice, so this needs its own transaction type field. And this goes with checks paid 2. And it needs its own activity field. And again, this goes with checks paid 2. Right? And I'm focusing down here to make sure everything's showing up exactly where and how I expect it to. Right? And it's also good, especially when you're getting in a section like this where there's check numbers, to just visually inspect, make sure I'm getting check number 1022 and 1023. So everything's coming together very nicely now. So we're almost there. We're almost at the point where we're ready to just reorder everything, right? We have this last table here, which does have an activity column. So the only thing we need here is the transaction type. So let's highlight ATM debit card. And let's change it. The title, that is, to ATM. Actually, we don't even need to do that on this one because it's going to come out just fine. Let's go with table, and this is for ATM debit card, right? So this is going to be the transaction type, so now we'll set the field heading. Boom, this one already has an activity field. All right, just scrolling up, making sure everything still kind of looks good. It's kind of fun, actually. At least I think it is, but I'm weird. And then other withdrawals is going to need its transaction type. Okay, I think we are ready for the last sort of phase of this. Okay, perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to get the order of these consistent. So let's widen up these columns. And there's one other thing that we're going to need to add to all these, right? And you may have figured it out already. You may be thinking about it and wondering if I'm going to know. But we need now, because we have the check number section, we need a column for check number, right? Because notice this is out of order. And so we're going to need to add check number to each of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do that as I get the rest of the layout done here. So what's going to happen is I have to make a decision now. What order do I want things in, right? So I have date, amount, activity, bank ref, number, and then transaction type, right? So these, let's just get these reordered. So how do we reorder these? I'm going to take the activity from this section, which is my paper deposits, right? Table 1. I want to move the activity over. It needs to be the third column so it lines up properly with the previous one. So up over here on my right, we're going to click here where it says edit the column order and visibility in the output, right? So that just pops up when we're there. And so I'm going to paper deposits 1. So across the top you can see where you have each of the different tables that you've created. And if you look carefully, each of these has a little icon to the left of it. And that's where you could actually reorder the table itself, right? Down here you have the columns that are available with the selected table, and notice there's check boxes on each of them. So this is where if I wanted to, I could exclude a column altogether. So we're going to take the activity, we're going to take the little double pointed arrow, click and drag, and we want that to be the third column. Let's go to paper deposits 2, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Okay, and then we go to checks paid 1, same thing, checks paid 2, same thing, and ATM debit card, we're already all good. So let's unselect this, and let's see what that looks like now. All right, so I've got my activity all lined up in every single table, right? So that's perfect. Still got my check numbers here, good news. And then we've got our transaction type. Now, in some of these cases, things are a little out of sync here, right? So I've got my reference number here, and you know why? Because I didn't merge these. So that fixes that. And the merging has to get done up here. Perfect. Now the checks need to get reordered all together because I've got my check number here. So let's do that. So let's go to checks paid 1, and everything else starts with the date. So we'll move the date over. So we have the date, and then let's just move the check number all the way out to the right for now. So this way we have date, then everything else should line up. That's checks paid 1, and then checks paid 2, we've got to do the same thing. So move the date over so it's first, and move the check number all the way out. All right, I'm just resizing these because I want to make sure I can see everything nice and clear, make sure it all makes sense. So now my activities are all lining up, my dates, amount, activity, everything's looking really good here. And I want to remind you again, just in case by now you're stopping and thinking, well, this takes a long time. I only have to do this once. Once this is done, I'm going to save my layout, and the next 11 statements of the year after this that I have to do are going to be as simple as opening up the PDF, loading the layout, and clicking convert. It's going to be that quick. It's going to be that simple. So I've got my check number out here. Now, done this way, I don't need to even bother appending the other tables with the check number because it'll just kind of stand out here on the own only in the places where it applies, right? So if everything else lines up, and again, at the end of the day, the real goal is to, as quickly as possible, get this into a format where you can get it into Excel. So that can be accomplished here. Based exactly on where we're at right now. The check number will be here. If after the export is done I want to move the check number, then of course we all know in Excel it's really easy to take this whole column and I can cut and paste it. And so if I wanted the check number to be in the second column, that's certainly very easy to do. So I think we're just about there. I'm going to save my layout. Yes, and then let's reduce this preview screen, because I just want to kind of comb it through once more. And then there's a couple of other things I want to show you that are really cool. Really cool stuff. Okay. If you want to. Again, a lot of the stuff that you can do in terms of formatting obviously can happen in Excel. But you also may be of the mindset that you want to minimize what you have to do in Excel, so that before exporting to Excel, you want to have everything as much as possible in the format that it needs to be, so that in a perfect world, you're going to click Convert, and then you're going to go open up your accounting software and start the import process right away. So if that's the case, then over here, I have a field here like Date. So I'm going to right-click, and I can format the output for Date. I'm going to right-click here and format the output for Number. And I may have already done this. I may have already told you about this, because I noticed that it looked like this was already set for Number, which is my choice. I did tell you this already. See, I'm getting old. I'm losing my memory. So you may want to go through, though, because I didn't do it for everything, and just format this stuff everywhere. Where are you? I'm out. Number. Okay, and now the other thing I promised, so I'm not going to make you watch me go format every single, date and amount column. But I had mentioned this earlier, what I want to show you now. So remember, we have these sections here in paper deposits and also checks paid, where I have two tables that are essentially the same thing. So I want to show you a really cool trick. And again, we got to resize these so I can see. Okay, so here's my paper deposits, right? And I really have two tables. So I'd like to be able to combine them into one. But as I mentioned earlier, before I could do that, I had to make sure I got the layout to be consistent. Now that it is, and I got the exact same columns in the exact same order for both of them, then what we can do is we can right-click Paper Deposits 2, append to Table, and we're going to append it to Paper Deposits 1. Boom. So notice what it did now is it combined it, and that's going to make this part easier, because remember, we had to sort of force the transaction type field on this one because it didn't have one of its own, right? I had created the first one out of the little header there. So that's going to eliminate our need to be concerned about that sort of stuff, right? Because otherwise, if I exported this and I sorted it before I remembered to copy this down, then it may no longer be clear that this is paper deposits. And so this one we want to edit the format probably, just so it's consistent. And notice you can do it down here as well. Perfect. So again, I'm not going to make you sit through that, but I wanted to show you that you could do that. So now let's go over here to checks paid, and let's append this to table checks paid 1. See, and now everything just kind of shifted. But see how it's starting to take shape that much better as you learn how to use it. And this is what I meant when I said you're going to need to pause the video and come back, because there's all these little options, in terms of appending to the table, and the output options, and, the way you can make the field show up anywhere you want. So there's a couple more things as far as that goes that I want to show you. There's some sort of automatic fields that we can add into this, which is great for audit trail type stuff in case you want it included. But before I show you that, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to make sure that you have your bank statement fully laid out like this, so that it's as close to what you can possibly get to as mine is in terms of the different columns and layouts. Granted, you may be using a statement from a different bank, so your columns may be a little different, but as long as you can get it as close as I have to a flat file, then do that. Pause the video, get caught up with me. Let's get your flat file ready, and then I'm going to show you a couple more, really what I would say are extra bells and whistles, but they just make this so much. It just makes it so cool. I guess that's the best way I could put it. So again, get caught up with me, and then resume the video when you're ready. Okay, so hopefully you did pause the video. Hopefully you got caught up. Otherwise, you're going to be watching the video again when you actually do pull out a bank statement to do this yourself. I've had to go through this actually quite a few times, to be honest with you, off recording, to get to the point where I really had the flow down and understood how to do it. So I mentioned that there were some audit trail type things that I wanted to show you. We're going to come over here to the Convert tab, and before we can convert, we're going to add this. We're going to click on this option here that says Predefined Fields. And here is where you can add some really cool stuff in terms of like the file name, I mean, you can see it's pretty straightforward here. You can do creation time. So there's a lot of information here that you can use to be included. Maybe the page, time of conversion. And once you click on and check off those options, and one other thing I want to make sure you notice, this footnote here, the star lets you know which of these fields are actually available based on the current document that you're editing. And so notice when I click OK, they show up here. Okay, and then again I can say, instead of showing up as a header like this, I can say show it in every line. But where'd you go? So this is something I might be inclined to say, do it with every line, and I'll do it for all of these. So I'm just right-clicking here. And so now they're showing up out here. And notice it shows up with every line. Now, I'm probably not going to include these columns when I import this information into my accounting software, but it's still really handy information to have available while I'm working in a file. And like I said, from an audit trail standpoint, it can be really useful because remember, you're not just going to use this to convert bank statements. Once you learn how to use a product like this, quite frankly, I'll be very honest and share with you my own sort of reaction to learning how to use this software is I'm going to add a whole segment, a whole consulting service on my Nerd Enterprises website, offering to do document conversions for people. Because imagine this is, what you've seen here is really a very simple layout. In terms of the fact that it's just a couple of pages. But imagine if this bank account or this bank statement had 50 pages. It would still be the same work that I just did, which only took a few minutes really, bearing in mind that I was slowing down to explain everything. But so after only a few minutes, even if this was a 500-page document, as long as all the pages have the same layout, I'm done, whether it's 2 pages or 500. And so imagine what you can do for clients if they have large documents that need to be converted like this. It's really, really powerful stuff. So that's why PDF to Excel is something that I think, frankly, after my own experience with it, every single accountant and bookkeeper should have this because there's so much value you can offer to your clients just by having a tool like this at your disposal. So the predefined fields is something I definitely wanted to make sure you got to see before we did the conversion. So now there's a couple of other things I want to show you because, again, it seems like we're ready, but, again, I'm going to tell you that we're not because there's a couple of things I want to do. So let's go to the layout. Let's save it. Again, I don't want to lose it. And every time I save it, I always like to just check and make sure I should do that before I save it, that everything still looks okay. We still got it. So now I want to direct your attention up here to this settings wheel, the cog wheel up here. When you click this, we already went here once before because I showed you about unchecking the right table names, right? Because I don't want the table names to show up in the export. But what you could also do here that's interesting is, if you notice the way it looks now, when I export this, each section, for each different transaction type, is going to have its own set of headers, right? So one thing and granted, again, when I export this to Excel, I can quickly sort and get rid of the extra rows that have the extra headers in them. That's easy enough to do. But again, it may be the case that you want to have this completely ready for import into your accounting software before you hit the export button, or as close as possible. So in that case, I can uncheck the right column names option, and when I click OK on that, all the headers are going to disappear, which means, mind you, that you'll have no headers, but that's okay because that will be really easy to insert right back in once you're in Excel. So that's up to you. You can either include the names and sort and delete, or you can not include them and then insert them. The other thing is keep empty rows, right? I'm going to get rid of that because I don't really need the empty rows. They're handy while I'm working with this, but I don't need them after that. Everything else I think I'm going to leave the same here. Let's click OK. And so notice, sure enough, my all the column headers are gone. So now we're ready to export. And by the way, just in case you're wondering or worried, you can still check this off to decide to include it if you want to, and they come right back in. No problem. They're all right there. Nothing is lost. So let's convert it. What do you say we actually do it? So we're going to go to convert, and I'm going to click here where it says convert. And look at that. In 2 seconds. The only time it took was the time it took me to click and drag it over from my other screen. And now, like I said, we can quickly insert the columns. This was my date. Boom. So now you're in Excel, right? I don't think I need to do much more. We have a whole course on Excel called Mastering Excel for Accounting Pros that'll teach you how to sort, subtotal, and even run pivot tables on this stuff if you wanted to. So, my friends, that is how you get a bank statement converted into a PDF file. Now, and again, I just want to emphasize the beauty of this is now that this is done, let's do the next month's statement just so you can see. And what we're going to actually first let's save the layout. Right? So let's save that, yes. And then the other thing that's important that I show you is that you can also now export it. So I want to save everything. And so now I have an export of a layout. Notice it's .layoutx, and it's got my, the information from the PDF file name in there. So I can just say this is my Comerica layout. So I can get rid of the account information that's there. And now we're going to close this. And we're going to open February, open, and we're going to load a layout. We're going to go Comerica 2, open. I think we're already good, folks. I think we're already good. I think I can hit convert now. Let's see what happens. Look at that. We got it. I'll move my check number up here, right? Let's cut this. Date, amount, check number. Now it looks like we got some extra data in here because the table sizes might have been different this time. So, yeah. So again, this will take 2 seconds to fix. Or actually what happened is there was no other withdrawal section. So that ended up picking up the footer information. So we can just delete those. And actually that was handy to go back to PDF to Excel to confirm that. All right. Let's go data, sort, first by transaction type, then by date, then by amount. Boom. Format this for date. Format this for number. At the bottom, I should get my extra copies of the headers. And that's it, my friends. So in another 30 seconds, basically, the second month was done. And I'm not going to make you sit and watch me go through the whole rest of the year, another 10 months. But as you can see, and I just wanted to sort of prove what I was telling you, so that you don't have to take my word for it, that once you get the layout done, it takes 2 seconds to get every other statement done. And for that matter, anytime I get another client with a Comerica bank account walking in my door, I've got the layout. And I've got the layout saved, and I've also got it exported in my folder here, so that if I want to have one of my bookkeepers, for example, do it for me this time, then I had it here in my sample docs, I can send them this Comerica.layoutx file and say, here, go import this layout, open up the statement, load the layout, and you're done. And you're basically done. You'll have a whole year's worth of bank statements in this format ready to be imported into the accounting software. In probably less than an hour, you'll get a whole year all set up and ready. It shouldn't take any longer than that. The layout's the hardest part, and when you're not slowing down to explain it, reality is maybe when you're newer at this, it's going to take you 20 minutes, and as you get better and better, it's going to take you more like 5 or 10 minutes. As always, my friends, I hope that you had some fun along the way while you learned something here. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.
Now that you've seen how you can quickly and easily get a layout done on a bank statement and get that exported into Excel, we're going to look at some other use cases that are going to be very common, especially for accountants and bookkeepers. One thing that comes up quite a bit is a client will come in my door and say, hey Seth, I'm setting up a brand new company file in my accounting software, and I want to bring over my lists from the previous company file that I was using or the previous software, but I can't get it electronically. There can be any number of reasons why this happens. The bottom line is, and what I'm trying to get at here, is that there are going to be times when we want to be able to easily import lists into our accounting software, but we won't be able to get that in perfect Excel format. Instead, we get a PDF from somewhere, and that needs to be converted so that we can accomplish the import, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at next.